Where did you grow up, and what was your first exposure to music?
So I was born here in San Diego and raised out in Hamul. Went to school here and stuff, and always felt like an attraction to music. I remember, like driving around with my, parents in the car and wondering how music came out of that tiny little box in the dash. There's no way there could be little people in there, could there? And because there's no way the music could just travel across the airwaves, could it? So seriously, those are questions that went through my mind as like a 5 and 6 year old. Like, what the hell's happening here? This stuff's cool. How did it get here?
Yeah.
And so I was just always drawn to music, and then. But I didn't want to play drums. I actually wanted to play guitar. My first hero, wasn't like a firefighter or a policeman or an astronaut. It was Alice Cooper. About 8 years old, my older brother brought home his girlfriend actually introduced us all to an Alice Cooper album, and I was like, holy cow, this stuff's cool. Not just because the music was so good, but that the look was so anti-everything our parents would want us to be into and about. It was so awkward, or whatever you want to call it. And so that was fun. It's always nice to oppose your parents as a child.
Oh yeah.
And so that, and then but again, it was still the music as much as anything, as much as the persona of the band. And because I always think of Alice Cooper as a band and not just Alice himself.
Yeah.
And because all that stuff would just be a gimmick if there weren't cool songs behind it. And for me, there was that. And then of course, around the same exact time, I got into Black Sabbath and I got into Yes. So and most of that was all brought in by my older brother, and it was Close to the Edge, and I don't remember which Sabbath album it was. It's probably the first one. And then, so I just got into all that stuff, and but I wanted to play guitar, and later on, I finally got an electric guitar, probably around, 6th grade or 7th grade, but it didn't make sense to me, not at all. I didn't understand this whole thing about, when the strings are open, it's E, A, G, B, E.
Yeah.
What the hell is that about? We're not A, B, C, D, E, F.
Let's jump ahead to the formation of Symbolic. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I answered an ad. They were looking for a drummer. At the time, they were called Ascension. And I came up and auditioned. They gave me a disc that had 4 songs on it. I had I think it was 2 nights to learn as much of them as I could. And I came up and we went through an audition rehearsal kind of thing. And they thought it was all right and said, come on back kind of thing, and it just developed from there. And they had mentioned that they couldn't really go forward with the name Ascension. I think maybe the previous drummer had come up with it or something. And so I said, well, I had a band called Symbolic, and I came up with that name. So and just let me make sure that the other guys are okay that I continue with it. Not that, if I wanted to, I could have just said screw it, but just be respectful of friends. And so I called the 2 remaining guys that I knew how to get a hold of, and they said, oh, absolutely, we're not doing anything with the name. You're the one who came up with it, so keep using it. So that's how he came up with the name.
All right, talk about when you left Symbolic, and then when you went on to Guild of Others.
So it just seemed that I wasn't really happy with some of the stuff that was going on, and I was making a bit of a fuss about it. And as one would do if you're not happy with something. And I'm sure they had their legitimate complaints about me, if nothing else, just that I was making too much of a fuss. So we had some shows, and we did those last couple shows. I think the last one I did with them was the one when we opened up for Brian Wheat's solo project called Soul Motor. And then that was it. After that show, we parted ways. And let's see, then it was a few years later, I had been talking with Tony Martin from Black Sabbath, and just emails back and forth is all it was. It wasn't anything that was like really, coming to a head or anything. And Tony said, yeah, if you put some stuff together and send me some tracks, I'd maybe be interested in singing on them, just depending, how it is. It has to fit,
Yeah.
It's like he can't just say, oh, I'll definitely do it and then get it and not like it or something like that and feel obligated. So it was all just sort of talk is all it was. And then I ran into Steve and Barbara, his wife, at a winery dog show, I think it was, up in LA. And it had been a couple of years had passed since Symbolic and I had parted ways. And I just said, hey, I've been talking to Tony Martin, and the one person I know who's like the best at coming up with some kick-ass Black Sabbath style riffs is you.
Yeah.
And I know you're prolific. And as long as he was still in Symbolic, I said, as long as the other guys don't mind and it doesn't get in the way of your work with Symbolic, if you want to do some side stuff, and we'll submit it to Tony. And he said, sure. So we started writing, and because I've known, I used to be I was interviewing people and taking pictures at rock concerts. I worked at a music column in a number of magazines for a number of years. So that introduced me, helped me build connections with a lot of people. And as Steve and I were writing all this stuff, I started reaching out to other people, and I talked to, Billy Sherwood from Yes, because Chris had unfortunately passed away by that point. And, just started putting the feelers out to see who else would want to be on the album once we had the tracks ready, always knowing that getting people to say I would be interested and then having them hear the tracks and still be interested is often two different things.
Oh, yeah.
Some were literally just by phone because I call them up. Others, Michael Sadler, getting him involved was a good example of how some of these things happen. So he and I had met on a Yes Cruise to the Edge, and his band Saga had been playing there. Saga, it looked like they probably weren't going to be touring for a little while there. They did it since they sort of regrouped and they're touring again. But there was a stretch there, probably, I don't know, around 2015 or 16. I'm not quite sure when all this happened now. Where, let's see, in fact, so I think it was 2018 is when I was in Germany. And so Michael and I had met on these cruises, and I was in Germany, and he was touring Germany with a different, like an all-star kind of outfit there in Europe. And he contacted me through Facebook Messenger and just said, hey, I'm in Germany playing, I forget what, like I was in Munich and Nuremberg and Berlin, and I always seemed to be like one city ahead of where he and his band thing was playing. So he kept saying, come see us, and I'll hook you with some seats. And I was, happy that and definitely wanted to do it, but my schedule, my flight plans, and touring or train tickets and all that stuff were all pre-purchased. So finally, after the second night, when I said, I'm sorry, I can't, I thought, man, I really should, take him up on this offer. Just at least show my appreciation. So I rescheduled going from Nuremberg to Berlin, and stayed an extra night in Nuremberg, and went to a show, and then talked to him briefly after the show. And while I was, we were talking after the show, I mentioned, hey, I'm putting this thing together, and I have a song or two that I think your voice would fit really well on. And he said, sure, when the tracks are ready, send them to me, and we'll see if they work. And sure enough, there was one left for him to sing on, and I sent him that one, and he liked it, and so that's how he came about to be on it. Craig Goldie is on an album because he and Steve were already friends. I think Steve had co-written a song or written some parts of a song for Craig, one of Craig's solo things, and so Craig just offered to do a solo and all that sort of stuff. So some of these things are people that we had been friends with prior, and some are people we had more recently met. And Derek Sherinian, he came about. Again, it was one of those things where I had met him over the years a couple times, And then I don't remember exactly which occasion specifically that I mentioned that I had a CD coming up and would be curious to see if he would want to play on it. But the standard thing, he said, sure, send me some tracks. And then I did, and he was interested, and I went up to his house, and we started working on some parts. And I think he did most of his writing on his own to the songs, but there were twice when I was up there with him, and once Steve went up as well, and we were in the studio with him sort of talking about things as he was doing them. So there wasn't much interference on our part in the sense of guidance or anything like that, because one of the reasons when you bring in people of that caliber is you bring them in to let them loose. You want their input on your album. So sometimes, if you have something really specific, it's good to convey that. But other times it's just, from my experience so far, it's just good to let them go because they're the ones who know what they're doing.
I remember hearing some of the demos. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so the demos are just Steve and I primarily, and then they can be anything from literally just guitar and drums, meaning there's no bass or keys. I don't remember what stage they were in when you heard them. So obviously that would be very stripped down. Sometimes, like lately, for the newer stuff, Steve has actually put down, like we'll record the drums, just demo drums at his house, sometimes on my electric kit, sometimes on my acoustic kit. And then he'll put guitars over that. Then he'll go ahead and put just his own versions of bass and keys and even vocals. And then, but that's just to sort of fill in the spaces. So like if he puts in keys, in no way is he sort of demanding or even implying that that's what the keys should be. He's just kind of within his own mind sort of filling out the space, and so it sounds a little bit more full than just guitar and drums. And whether whoever's going to play keys on that song follows what they hear or goes in a completely different direction is always yet to be seen. But that's why probably what you heard from, say, a middle process demo stage to a finished stage would sound very different.
Let's go down the track list. And what are the concepts behind the lyrics, and how did you write the music?
I don't know so much about the lyrical content. I mean, I know the words for not the first song.
Other side. Because I play that
so,
song probably more than any of the other ones. It's just that's like my favorite one off of it. Definitely.
Cool.
The first song, and I'll be setting up to play my guitar or whatever, and I'll just put it on and I just start singing to it.
Nice. Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah. So for me, I can just tell you the idea of where that came from. When I was talking to Steve about writing material and stuff, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to bring Graham Bonnet in. And so we thought, okay, let's write some more sort of some straight ahead kind of rocking things that are, we both have, heavy and progressive attributes to our likings of music, anything from creating to listening. And but some of them we didn't really want to push too much prog on, and this was one of them. The idea was just to keep it fairly basic, something that maybe Graham's voice would work on. And so that's how that came about. And Steve would come up with some of the ideas basically at his house and come over to my house where I had an electric drum kit set up at the time, and we would arrange the songs and stuff. And so that was all before the melodies and the lyrics were put on. The one thing I have heard him say that Other Side was something about sort of like a love story and reaching across to, someone here on this side still alive and someone on the other side who had died. And what direction, who's reaching to who from what side, of the realm. I don't know. I don't know where that all begins. I guess I'd have to actually read his lyrics on that.
So the next song is Balance.
So Balance, we just let it grow a little more. It's obviously a little bit more proggy, particularly that center section. Yeah. That's closer to my liking. I mean, it's like if I had to, I like all the songs. Obviously, I wouldn't participate in making them. But if I had to choose between Other Side and Balance, I would definitely in fact choose Balance. And that was a lot of fun. That whole center section, basically, so everything up to that center section, Steve had come up with for the most part, I'm pretty sure. And then we had sort of stopped. The song had only been developed up to that center section, and then I started playing with kind of a drum beat, and then putting together that center solo section, and then showing it to Steve. And then at the tail end, I just took all the different parts that Steve had already previously written and kind of rearranged them into smaller bits, going out. And so that song was primarily written by Steve, but a lot of the arrangement from the center section out was by me.
All right. Then the next one is called Always There.
So that I wrote the music for mostly, and then I gave it to Steve, and he added a couple of things. I can come up with ideas, but he really helps develop them and turn them into more, listenable songs. And then so I was writing some lyrics to it and not satisfied with the process. I was just thinking, the song is a fairly simple song, so the melody is going to really have to carry it. Otherwise, it's just going to be boring. Yeah. And so I wasn't doing it justice. And I said to Mark, because Mark sang on all but 2 songs, and he hadn't really been given a chance to write anything. And I've seen some of the stuff that he's done on his own. He's actually extremely talented. So I just said to Mark, I said, hey, if you're interested, why don't you write the lyrics? I'm not really cutting it on this one. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to even show you what I've begun with, because I don't want to mess with your own creative style. I don't want to influence it at all. I don't want you to feel like you have to work within a certain parameter that I've begun. And he goes, okay, great. And so after a while, he came back with a demo version of what he had written, melody-wise and lyric-wise, and he kicked my ass. The way the melody carries, like I was writing in brackets, here's the verse, here's the chorus, here's the verse, here's the chorus. Yeah. And he was writing over some of these transition moments, musical transition moments. And I would have never thought to do that. And the melody line he created and the way he walked over those transition moments just blew me away. And I think that makes the song as much as the music does. Yeah.
Okay, the next song is Memento.
So, Memento, Steve could probably have a lot more input on that. For me, I just know the process. This was sort of typical. He would have ideas and come over here, and we'd kind of arrange them together. Once he had gotten, the most memorable thing about that for me, there's 2 things. Once we'd gotten everything basically ready, all the tracks done and stuff, Steve had some lyrics that made me think of all things. Made me think of Alice Cooper's Dead Babies from the Killer album. And so that's why I reached out to Michael and Lynn and asked them if they would want to do a voiceover, because there's a voiceover in there where it's basically like doting parents looking over their, like a newborn child in a crib, thinking like what life has to do, or has to offer, coming up for this new baby. Yeah. And of course, because I'm a little twisted, having grown up listening to Alice Cooper, the moment I thought baby, I thought dead babies. And that may not be healthy, but that's what happened. So we asked Michael and Lynn, I wrote out this little script for them, and they read it basically just into my phone. And then we recorded it on my phone, and we gave it to the engineer, and he placed it in the song where we wanted it. The other thing is there's those piano solo spots in that song that we had everything done. Derek had done his part, and those piano solo spots weren't there. They were just some sort of padded chords that were very kind of Elton John sort of padded sounding chords, the choice of chords that he'd used, and they sounded cool. And he thought he was intentionally leaving them open for Steve or someone else to solo over, but I wanted him to do solos on those spots. I wanted some like killer, keyboard synth kind of stuff, go crazy. And so I go, hey man, Steve and I were up at his house, and I said, those spots are actually for you, and I love what you did. Those chords are great. I go, they're very Elton John. And he kind of smiled, and he looked at me, and he goes, yeah, I was thinking Madman Across the Water. So that was nice. We were on the sort of the same wavelength, at least in what we were hearing. Mm-hmm. And then but he took it in another direction. The solos there, the piano solos that are kind of like a sort of a bouncy ragtime. I was thinking, like I'd mentioned, it's like some wizardry, kind of synth stuff. And so he goes, okay, I've got an idea. Here's what I might do. And Steve and I are standing there, and he starts just playing this piano. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not at all what I was thinking. But it's like one of those things where you just have to kind of just, hand it over to someone, trust them, and then be open to what they come up with. And even if it strikes you differently than what you expected, just sit with it for a while. Make sure that like don't just veto it. Say that's not what I had in mind, so I'm vetoing it. Don't do that at all. And this is my experiences. And then when I sat back and I listened to it all being played together, I thought that took the song in such a different direction for those moments that I absolutely love it. And that's one of the things that makes that song, even though it's not like metal by any means, but it's very proggy. Yeah. And I think those two piano solos are two great moments in that song that never would have existed, if Derek hadn't just come up with them on the spot.
Okay. And the next one is New World Disorder.
So, New World Disorder, I wrote most of the lyrics for that. Steve wrote a few lines. I think Steve probably wrote most of the music to that. And then there's that center section, the odd time center section that Derek does a solo over. So all I can say, again, that came up, probably Steve wrote most of the parts, and we put it together here. And then the lyrics, I forget. I think Steve probably came up with the melody, and then I filled the melody in with the lyrics. Is what I think happened for the most part. And then the lyrics just sort of came about, kind of just sort of my view on kind of what happens or what's happening politically and stuff. So, most of our songs don't have a whole lot of politics or anything in them, not because we refuse to address those issues, just because Steve writes a lot of the lyrics, and that doesn't seem to be a direction that he tends to write in. And so this one had some sort of political things in it, and a lot of that came from me.
Okay. The next one would be Elysium.
So Elysium... again, mostly Steve's writing musically, and then the lyrics and melody, all that he put all that together. We gave that one to that's the one that Michael Sadler ended up singing on, and his vocals are amazing. I remember he called me one time. He said, "Okay, what are these lyrics actually about?" Because I think he wanted to be able to sort of understand, the character of the song and what was going on. Like a warrior dying, and then going to almost like the Vikings Valhalla kind of thing, to the other side, and what he's met with there. More peace, like the battle's kind of over now. You can finally have, just lay down your sword and have a life of peace. I think is kind of what that's about.
Okay. And the one that Craig Goldie played on, Veil of Insanity.
Yeah. So with that, Craig was really nice. He offered his services, and he did a smoking solo that had these super insane moments in it. And I said to Steve, I go, man, that really kicks ass. Can we ask him to do another one? He goes, what? And I go, well, yeah. I go, it kicks ass, but I think there's another approach might fit the character of the song better. And instead of looking at me and saying you're an ungrateful idiot, he goes, okay, I'll ask him. And Craig was very, very kind. And not that I was ungrateful at all. I was very grateful. If we used the first one, it would have been fine. But I just thought, sometimes, let's just have options, kind of thing. Yeah. And so he came up with the second one, and the second one is actually the one that you hear on there. And to me, it's just a more just pedal to the metal, kind of just shredding all the way through with a lot of cool moments in it. And the other one had a lot of that same character, but a couple moments where it went in a little different direction, and I wasn't sure that really suited the song as much. And so Craig was very kind and very generous in offering that second solo as well as the first. And the good thing about that is now, in case you ever do like a re-release, remastered versions of something, if there's ever a call to do that, we actually have 4 songs that have all Billy Sherwood on bass, because I mentioned Tony Franklin's on the whole album. Well, Billy Sherwood had actually played 4 songs also. So 4 of those same songs that are on the album have Billy Sherwood on bass, so we can have completely different bass lines. And that song, and we have a second solo for that song. So, I mean, we could actually, revamp, remix some of these songs and have completely different, parts for them. Yeah. And then I like the character of that song, though. It starts out heavy, but the verse, I think the verse in a lot of ways is what helps carry that song. It's a little more almost bouncy and groove oriented. And it's just very different. Like, to me, the song takes off in one direction and then suddenly has a completely different feel. Oh, yeah. And then, and I just love that. I love that. I think Mark did a great job singing that. And I should have mentioned also that song Balance, that has Henrik Bath. That's the one that has Henrik Bath from Dark Water on it. And he did a phenomenal job singing that, just as Michael Sadler did on Elysium.
And then the last one on the album is Spirit Host.
Yeah, so that's funny. We gave that song, that one I thought was the closest thing that really would have brought Tony Martin, into the project. And I sent that to him, and he responded. He says, it's a good song. He says, but it just seemed like he and Tony Iommi were about to start. Tony Martin and Tony Iommi were supposed to jump on some of the albums that they had done together when Tony was in the Black Sabbath lineup. And I think they were supposed to remaster and remix those, and all that stuff. And so Tony Martin wasn't at that time really available. And he said, send me some other songs too, so I can hear them. And I sent him some other songs, and we'd been in touch since then, but he ended up not being on the album. And so we'll certainly talk to him for future stuff. But he ended up not being on the album. And let's see, that song, writing-wise, that was cool because, the beginning's very separate from the rest of the song. And that was one of the things where we even do in 2 parts. Like, you just do the beginning, and then I remember Steve and I were in the studio, like, do we want the heavy part of the song to come in on the beat right after the softer part, or do we want it to wait a pause and sit there kind of and have just sort of sound effects, some of Derek Sherinian's sound effects and stuff. So we added that gap for like suspense for a moment, and so that's some of the stuff you can do in the studio, of course. You decide to work with parts separately and stuff. And then the funny thing with that, though, we submitted everything. We got that little minor record deal there with Louder Than Loud. And we sent everything off to the printer to have it all printed up, and all the album itself says Spirit Host on it, but all the reviews started coming in. When the album was being sent out, and our promotion people, I guess maybe in the bio that they sent out or something to accompany the album, they must have written Spirit Ghost instead of Spirit Host, because I noticed that, like, on all the reviews, we get stuff from Japan and Spain and Mexico and Germany and UK, and all of these things, when they went through a track list, kind of like what you just did, they talk about each of the songs, they would call it Spirit Ghost. And I'm like, where did that come from?
Going on from there, I know you guys are working on a new album. Could you give any details about that one?
Yeah, so we really decided to just kind of go all out on this one, in the sense of just letting creativity flow, and we ended up with 2 songs that are about 25 minutes long each. Just putting kind of a no rules on, like, as long as parts work together well. Keep attaching them. How far can we take this? But at a certain point, you have to kind of come back to some previous parts so that things make sense and there's continuity. Otherwise, you just have a prolonged meandering song that goes on and on and on in all these different directions. And so we did that. That was the one sort of, it wasn't quite a rule, but maybe a semi-rule in the writing process for that, was just, we can do everything we want with it, but just make sure there's continuity. And So that's why you'll hear some recurring parts in those. Other than that, the songs kind of just keep moving on. And then there's 4 more average length songs, and we got all the drums have been recorded up with Rich Mauser, the guy who engineered the first album. We went up to LA to do that, and then Steve has been recording all the guitars at his house because he's got the capabilities to do that. So he's done with all the guitars except for there's one song that's primarily acoustic that I wrote most of that, and so that's the only one that the guitars aren't yet finished on. And then so all the other stuff has been sent up to Rich, and Rich between working with his other people, he's worked with everyone from Spock's Beard and Dream Theater and Neil Morse and all sorts of people. That's why we chose him, because he's used to dealing with sort of keyboard heavy prog kind of stuff, and that's a totally different ear than, like, say, your average stripped down sort of just guitar based drums rock band. When you start adding all that, take up all that frequency space with keyboards and stuff, it becomes a whole different animal. And Rich has a great ear for that. So anyway, he's all the rest of the songs are with him, and when he has time, he'll put the guitar tracks down on the drum tracks, and at that point is when we start sending them out to Derek and Tony and whoever else that we end up bringing in. That's where we got the name Guild of Others was intentionally brought in, because the whole point was to have other people on it. On each album would have new people, so it's not really a band. It's just Steve and I as the nucleus, and then bringing in other people. The thing that has sort of changed a little bit of that initial thought going into it was, as a core sound with Derek and Tony, there's really something identifiable about our sound, I think, and we want to keep that. They did such a great job that we definitely want to have them on the next album, and they've expressed a desire to be there as well, so that's good. But we will still get, other guitar players, maybe some percussion players, singers, of course, and, stuff like that. So, and maybe even some violin. We'll figure out, what we're going to get on all these bigger songs, these longer songs. But then in the process of all this, when we finished recording the drums, actually a year ago, Steve was on a bit of a writing jag again. He suddenly had, I got all these ideas. So instead of starting immediately to record the guitars for this album, while Rich was still pre-mixing the drums, Steve started writing a bunch of new stuff. And that's part of what's taken this whole extra year to get everything done. The second album has taken quite some time. But it's because we actually haven't just been working on this album. We've basically been writing a whole nother album. So now we have, well more than 2 albums worth of material. And we have 6 more songs that we're going to go up and record the drums with Rich here pretty soon, probably within the next couple months. And then start laying down the guitars and stuff for that, and then we'll pick and choose, what do we want on which albums, what songs go best together, and that sort of stuff.
You're gonna get Tony Martin on any of the new songs?
Material?
Yeah, the new material.
Well, we would certainly love to. Tony's got a phenomenal voice, and it was even just talking with him for a while, corresponding with him. He seemed like a cool guy. It was I enjoyed it. Well, as usual, it depends on if particularly with vocalists, they have to feel like, does this song fit my vocal style, and of course, availability. Those 2 big things, the artist has to want to be on the song, and they have to be available, not, so it's not too busy. So if those kind of things line up, then, we're willing to basically talk with anyone that we think would make a good fit, and no doubt vocally, Tony's got a great voice. There's some other people that we've talked to in the meantime that we would love to see if, when everything's done, if they're available and the style, everything fits. They'll all be sort of like ifs until the final thing is done.
Do you have an idea of when the album will be completed?
Well, yeah. So I'd really hoped that we'd be basically at a release date by now, or at least right around now. But at this point, I bet it wouldn't be till closer to the end of this year, because we still, Rich has to put all the guitars onto the drums. Then we have to, send it out to Derek and Tony, and then the other people who will be on it. And that all depends on those people's availability. So it could be a number of months, anywhere from like 4 months till the end of the year, I bet. So it's quite a window.
What's your opinion on different genres of rock and metal?
Well, some of them I listen to a lot. I mean, my favorite thing is prog rock. I'm a big progressive guy, and then I like heavy stuff. I mean, sometimes it can get so heavy that it's just sort of bashing and aggressive for aggression's sake, which is fun for a moment for me, but it doesn't have a long-term appeal for me, because I like prog so much. That probably explains some of it. For me, a song has to kind of go somewhere. I mean, I like some things that could just be sort of straightforward and heavy for a few minutes. Like a real easy example for that would be like, Sabbath's Paranoid. It doesn't have many twists and turns or anything for it, but I mean, it became a hit for a reason. It's a good, straightforward, short song.
Oh, yeah.
And but if you just did that straightforward thing and you did it for like 11 minutes, it would get boring.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like that with me. If a song doesn't kind of get up and go somewhere and have a couple twists and turns in it, I may or may not like it, but I'm much more apt to like something that kind of offers a little more.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Okay, you too.